Dave, thank you so much. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to introduce a couple of other guests that are joining us from Miller Coors today. Josh Mason, who is the manager of customer service and supply. Welcome, Josh. And John Stonebreaker, vice president and plant manager at the plant as well. So we're both thrilled to have you here as well. And then our speaker today, Peter Coors. Peter earned his undergraduate degree in operations research and industrial engineering, as well as his master's from Cornell University. He actually started his tour with Coors Brewing in Elton. And so he started here, but then he headed off from here to Colorado to study brewing at Coors in Golden, receiving his diploma in brewing 2 years later. So John, if you were thinking about going back and getting another degree in brewing, and his career with Coors has taken him to Colorado, to California, and to Texas, and now back to Virginia. So as the manager of brewing operations, we're thrilled to have him here. So please join me in welcoming Peter Coors.
All right, well, thank you very much for the invitation. So how do I get the projector going? There we go. So we'll get that going. We'll start to talk a little bit about the history of what is now known as Miller Coors. So really two founding families. On the Miller side, founded in 1855 in Milwaukee. And there's a fair number of breweries that were founded in Milwaukee because they have really good water there, right there on the Great Lakes, a nice large supply of water. And built with a philosophy of great taste and great quality of the beer. So as you look at 2008, which is when these two companies came together, they were the number 2 brewery in the country, right behind what it was known at the time as Anheuser-Busch or Budweiser. So Bud Light, and all those brands was number 1. Miller was number 2, and Coors was number 3 at the time. On the Coors side, founded by Adolph Coors in 1873 in Golden, Colorado. Both of these breweries still sit on the same location as they were originally founded, which is kind of fun. So we can really, on both sides, trace our history back. And quality and innovation were big cornerstones for Adolph Coors. Being in Colorado back in the 1800s, there wasn't a lot of good, strong resources, so that he got involved with making his own malt, making his own bottles, things like that. And that vertical integration helped us survive Prohibition. And as I said, they were number 3 brewer in the country. So in 2008, almost $4 billion in sales for Miller, and $2.65 billion in sales for Coors. So two very large companies came together. All right. So one of the questions I get a lot of is, what is Miller Coors? So Miller Coors is a joint venture that was formed here in the United States. From a management perspective, it's a 50-50 joint venture. But from an ownership perspective, SAB Miller, which I'll give a little history there in a second, owns 58%, and Molson Coors owns the other 42%. And that's at least where we stand currently, and we'll talk about that here in a second. SAB Miller is South African Breweries Miller. They purchased Miller Brewing Company back in, I think it was 2001, to become SAB Miller. So they're a big international corporation. On the Coors side, about 11 years ago, Molson and Coors came together. The Molson family is very involved with the business. The Coors family is very involved with the business. So we came together with a merger of equals. So now are co-listed on the New York Stock Exchange and everything like that. So a little bit of a difficult corporate structure right now. So I'm on, I think, the 3rd slide. That one. Perfect. So all the brands from both Miller and Coors came together in all of the United States and Puerto Rico. So outside of the United States, we still do compete, and some places more more directly than others. But if you go to the next slide real quick. There was a big announcement last fall that ABI, or Anheuser-Busch InBev, was going to try to purchase SAB Miller. Too many names. SAB Miller. That is going to be about a $105 billion transaction. So it's a huge, huge transaction. Part of that was that the United States, they could not own both a good chunk of Miller Coors and all the Budweiser brands. So they came to Molson Coors and found financial terms for Molson Coors to buy the portion of Miller Coors that it doesn't currently own. So the new corporate structure will look like, so there's Molson Coors Canada, the UK and Central Europe, International, and then Molson Coors will all sit under Miller Coors will all sit under the Molson Coors head company. So if everything goes as planned, it'll probably be give or take September timeframe when that transaction happens. So that was in the news, I think, last week that there was a big stock sale to help cover some of the price of purchase in the company. So a little bit about our brands. You can see just a smattering. I think we have over 100 brands. Some play much bigger than others. From a Shenandoah perspective right now, we only make a handful of them. So Coors Light is something that we've been making here since we came to the Valley 28 years ago. Keystone and Blue Moon are on this list as well up there. We do make Killian's, Irish Red, and Coors Extra Gold. There's some other brands that we make. So we have a very small portfolio coming out of Shenandoah, but internationally or nationally, we've got a very large portfolio that goes up against just about any category. Go ahead and hit the next one. A little bit about where we're laid out. So we have right now 8 large breweries and a couple of relatively small breweries, ranging everywhere from California out to Elkton. Just south of us in Eden, North Carolina, back in September, we announced we were going to be closing that brewery. That will help the Shenandoah Brewery pick up a fair amount of volume, but it's always tough to lose one of our breweries. Over the last 8 years, we've lost about 10 million barrels of capacity. To put that in perspective, this year in Shenandoah, we're going to brew just over 5.5 million barrels. So we've lost a lot of volume. That's led to a downsizing for the company, which is unfortunate. Fortunately, the Shenandoah Brewery is one that was chosen to stay open. We also do have a couple of we refer to as craft breweries. So Leinenkugel's out of Wisconsin. Not a big player in this market, but a family brewer that's been around for 6 generations. We do have the Sandlot Brewery, which is the home of Blue Moon. And then the Blue Star is Crispin. We bought a cidery a few years ago. There's been a lot of consolidation in the craft business, and Miller Coors has played a small part. So Crispin was one of them, and last year we bought a small craft brewery in San Diego called St. Archer's. So we actually, we do have St. Archer's on there. So that's kind of our play into craft as well as Blue Moon. So we've not played as much as our competitor Anheuser-Busch has in the craft world. A little bit about the Shenandoah Brewery specifically. It's nestled on about 1,800 acres. The most modern, large-scale brewery in North America. The packaging hall was built about 28 years ago. The brewery itself was built about 8 years ago. For the first 20 years of our existence, we shipped beer out from Golden, and then we would package it here. So that was a big addition. But over that 28 years, we've expanded can lines, bottle lines, keg lines, warehouses. So it's been a continuous improvement on that facility. So it's not like we put a bunch of money in 28 years ago and we're still riding those assets. There's a lot of very new packaging equipment out there. We have about 450 employees, and we are one of the key employers in the area. The only brewery in the United States to be OSHA VPP certified. That's a voluntary protection program, so we invite them in once every 3 years to recertify us as being VPP certified. And that's just really a partnership to make sure we're doing everything right. And then finally, this year we're going to do 5.4 million barrels of outstanding quality beer. So there's our layout. 82% of our volume is Coors Light. So that's the big horse that really drives our volume there. 10% is Key Light, Extra Gold, Killian's, and Blue Moon are all relatively small, but very important pieces of our portfolio. 3 can lines, 2 bottle lines, a keg line. We have about 8.2 million barrels worth of capacity, so we're very much underutilized, but we're going to pick up a lot of that volume coming into the second half of this year and into next year. And then 157,000 square feet under roof is a distribution center, so we can house a lot of volume, so they can send beer from other breweries, get it here, consolidate it onto trucks, and head off to our distributors. And we're growing, which is the good news. So this year we'll be adding Miller Lite and Miller High Life to our portfolio of brands that we make here in the Valley, and that's going to be a great addition. And that's going to be a significant capital investment, about $40 million. It's going to be coming in. We're adding a new high-speed aluminum pint line. So that package you see there on the right is an aluminum pint. A great package, especially if you're out and about, fishing or at the beach or something like that. You can put the top back on and you're not going to spill your beer, which is obviously something that's critical. With that, we work hard to make beer. So with that $40 million in capital, we are going to increase our headcount by about 25 full-time employees and another 40 seasonal workers. So we are going to grow both our asset base as well as our employment base. So a little bit of key financials. Annual gross revenue about $800 million, so pretty significant. Our annual finance impact about $500 million. To put that into perspective, we're on par with James Madison University, so it's a pretty large impact to the community. Want to highlight wages, salaries, and benefits of over $50 million. So that's money that's going into people's pockets here in the Rockingham County, Page County, Augusta County area. Production volume, as I said, is about 5.4, and asset base, it's worth about $760 million. So a large asset here. I want to talk a little bit about some special local interests. So goods, services from Virginia-based companies, about $80 million. Most of that is glass out of Danville, down in the southern part of the state. A machine and tool tax to Rockingham County of about $4 million. So it really helps the county make their budget every year. And real estate taxes is about $600,000. So large tax base, both from an employment perspective and a property perspective. And most importantly, we have 450 local jobs. So some of you guys might have seen this advertisement in the paper a few months ago. And we're across the country really kind of shouting out that we are local in many of our markets. So we have 8 big breweries that are employing a lot of folks. So both from a billboard perspective and a print perspective, we've started talking about it because a lot of our craft competitors talk about being local. For you guys here in Harrisonburg, we're as local as just about anybody else. So very important piece of things. So of those 450 employees, about 20% of those employees have over 25 years of service with us, and average about 15 years. So there's not a lot of people that leave unless they're retiring. And we've never had a layoff. So we did have a voluntary severance at the end of the last year. We did offer up early retirement for a bunch of folks. Those were all voluntary. We sent them off on their way with a nice retirement package, and they were very happy to take it because many of them were thinking about retiring anyways. So it really worked out for them. But when folks get hired on at Miller Coors, our goal is to never have them leave until they're ready to retire and move on to the next stage of their life. So standing for jobs is something that's pretty critical for us. A little bit about our impact around the community. So 48 of our salaried workforce, which is just over half, have been raised in the Shenandoah Valley. So we do hire a fair number of local folks. I'm not one of them, but we do have a lot of local folks that we do hire. Graduates from JMU, Bridgewater, Mary Baldwin, Virginia Tech, and UVA, as well as quite a few of the high schools in the area. So we are hiring a fair number of folks locally. We always look local first because they understand our culture, they understand our community, and many of them have friends and family that work at our brewery, so we can kind of vet them out through that route before we go look elsewhere for leaders within the company, within the brewery. Excuse me. And then we stand for successful partnerships. We talked a little bit about the economics, developing our workforce through education. We do a lot of work with Blue Ridge Community College to get our employees additional education so they can move up in their career. Legislative involvement, play a fair amount in Richmond, making sure that the beer business is being taken care of, and manufacturers in general are being taken care of here in Virginia. Social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and community involvement we'll talk about here in the next slide. So we do take our leaders and we do put them out in the community as much as we can. So we have board representation on United Way, Rockingham County Chamber of Commerce, the Education Foundation, Blue Ridge Community College, James Madison University. So we take our leadership skills and we try to help out as many of our community organizations as possible. And then provide input around what we need going forward. Because someone like James Madison is always looking to say, hey, what kind of folks are you going to be looking for in 5 years or 10 years, so we can start preparing the right students for you to be able to hire. HR Chamber Vision 2020, we were definitely a participant there. Involved with Pure Water, because as we sit on the Shenandoah River and right next to the Shenandoah National Park, water and air quality are something that are very important to us. The two folks here, they're standing next to our Gembacher, and basically what that does is it converts some of the methane that we get from our wastewater treatment plant, and it turns it into electricity. So, just about as green as it can get, that type of electricity that we're generating for the brewery. And then a little bit of our environmental recognition. We were the Governor's Environmental Excellence Award for 11, 12, 13, 14. I don't think they've announced 15 yet, so we'll have to update that slide hopefully here. And then I talked about VPP. So we've been back since 2008. We were on the VPP list. Contributions and volunteerism. So as a brewery this year, we contributed $87,000 to the United Way, as well as 9,000 hours of community service. So Miller Coors will pay United Way $2 for every hour that one of our folks volunteers. So we're always pushing our folks to get those volunteer hours logged into our system so that we can increase that as much as possible. Another one is alcohol awareness. We support responsible drinking whenever we can. So, a lot of beer festivals and other places, we enjoy having our folks go out and serve that beer, and responsibility is one of those key pieces. So if you're ever organizing an event and you need some folks to help out, no matter what it is, give us a call. We've got 450 folks that live here in the area who love to help out on volunteer efforts. So reach out to us, and we'll see if we can work something out to get some of our folks out there in the community. And then just a quick list of some of the organizations that we take part in. We talked a little about United Way already, SPCA, Salvation Army. You can see the list, but we're always out there. We do a big turkey giveaway right before Thanksgiving, a ham giveaway right before Christmas, and just ways that we can be a better partner with particularly folks in the Elkton area, because that's where we sit, and we're just down the road. So in closing, it's you might have seen this billboard as you're coming on 81, but we do stand for Virginia. We stand for Rockingham County, and we stand for Harrisonburg. So I figured I'd open up to some questions if there are any. Yes, sir.
All right, Peter, you got your degree in brewing. Can you explain a little bit more exactly what a diploma in brewing entails?
Sure. It's more than just beer drinking. There's a organization out of the UK called the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, and they offer exams once a year, and it's kind of like taking the bar. So you have to. Sometimes people laugh, some people don't. But it's three 3-hour written exams. So I did my studies in Golden. I learned everything from how to make malt to how to package beer, and the technical side as well as the practical side. So I got that, and there is a master brewer certificate that I haven't gone after yet, but we do have a fair number of those in the company as well. But it's the science of making beer, chemistry, biology, all that kind of fun stuff. So, yes, sir.
I'm John Downey. I'm the president of Blue Ridge Community College, so thanks for mentioning us, and we value the partnership. I'm wondering about the definition of craft beer. What makes it craft beer versus regular beer?
It keeps changing. So the reason I say it keeps changing is that a few years ago it was set at less than 2 million barrels, and a barrel is about 13 cases. When Boston Beer got too big, they changed it to 6 million barrels. And then to include some other breweries, they changed the definition from being malt only to traditional ingredients. So as far as I can tell, the Brewers Association's definition of craft brewery is anybody except for Miller, Coors, or Budweiser. But all joking aside, technically you're below 6 million barrels. You use traditional brewing techniques, and you're owned less than 25% by a non-craft brewery. So Lagunitas out of California, was bought. 50% of it was bought recently, so they lost their craft brewery title, or their designation. But it's more of kind of a segment designation than anything else. Yes, sir.
In your coursework and getting your diploma, did you do any research on the history of beer making? And to me, it just seems such a complex process.
Yes.
Who was the first person that said, "Oh, I'm going to invent beer"?
It's a tough question to answer. So it goes back to Egyptian times, and you look at some of the old hieroglyphs, and there are hieroglyphs that indicate something similar to beer. And really, if you take grain and you grind it up and you put it in water, it will naturally start to ferment because there's yeast in the air. So that was some of the earlier days. You get into the medieval times, and that's when hops came in. Before hops, they used all sorts of different bittering agents and flavoring agents. But that's really kind of that 1200 is when we really saw beer as we know it today start to kind of come to the forefront. And then you got kind of two different families of brewing, which is the English family, which is the ales, which use top fermenting yeast, and you have the German family of brewing, which is lagers, which is bottom fermenting yeast. And it all has to do with which way the yeast floats goes when it gets done eating all the sugar. But yeah, I mean, you can look back, in most cultures they have something similar to beer. So wines are obviously a fruit-based, and then beer is a grain-based. But whether it be a rice or corn or wheat or barley, it goes back quite a ways. Yes, sir.
You mentioned some seasonal employees, which would lead me to believe your workload is cyclical.
Yes.
What makes it cyclical?
When it's 80 degrees out and it's sunny, people have more barbecues, they're more likely to drink than when it's 40 degrees and snowing. And that's really the driver, summer season versus winter season. We also bring those folks in to help augment our employees for vacation relief. So a lot of people want to take vacation during the summer. So by bringing in seasonal employees for the summer, we enable more of our folks to get off for vacation. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned a lot of your craft brewers use traditional brewing methods.
Yep.
How does that differ from your brewing methods?
So we're about as traditional as anybody, but the big difference is we use, here we actually use corn syrup. Budweiser uses rice. And that was one of the big challenges that the Brewing Association had with us is that, but to make a Coors Light, I've tried to make it with all malt, you just can't do it. You have too many malty flavors there. But it's really the use of syrups and we refer to as adjuncts, so any source of sugar that's not from malt. Is that a question in the back?
How many truckloads of beer do you ship out of here in a day?
Josh, about 200?
In a given day, it's about 150 on average.
Right, all the way in the back.
You said that your all production was down. What is total beer consumption?
So 2015 total beer consumption was about the same level as it was in 1985. So it's about, give or take, 200 million barrels a year is for the whole beer industry. So that includes crafts, imports, and all of our brands. So.
People aren't drinking more beer; they're just drinking more.
Yeah, what we're seeing is folks will switch from a Coors Light to a craft beer, and a guy that might have 2 beers with dinner, 2 Coors Lights with dinner, will have 1 craft beer, and so that's where I think we're seeing the pressure down on consumption, and especially as you look at that 21 to 25-year-old beer drinker, where they used to be the beer drinker that would go out to the store and buy a 30-pack of Keystone Light. You're seeing them buy more and more. You see it buy more and more craft beer. and less of it. So they've got $20 in their pocket, and they're just distributing that $20 differently than they did in the past. Yes, sir.
You kind of noted on how market share is being deteriorated a little bit. Do you all foresee your future in order to retain the market share that you have, it being important to acquire craft breweries in order to maintain that?
We're treading very carefully when it comes to acquiring. We have, what is it? Growth model, a purchase model, and then an accelerate model. So we do, like, Blue Moon is a great example. So 21 years ago, we came up with the idea of Blue Moon. Now it's one of our larger brands in the portfolio. So we're looking for brands like that we can launch ourselves and grow. The multiples on a lot of those craft breweries right now are very high. And it's, you're getting significant multiples on sales. Some of these guys aren't even turning a profit and getting, these giant multiples. So it's difficult for us to, integrate those brands into our portfolio, because it goes from, oh yeah, I know Joe and he brews this brand, to, oh, now it's part of Miller Coors, and you lose a lot of that following. And it's tough to scale them because you've got a lot of competition. So we're looking more towards developing internally, but we have, as I said, we've bought a couple. So we're looking at kind of all paths there. Yes, sir.
Peter, what's your relationship to the Coors family, and particularly the original founder of the company?
So Adolf Coors is my great-great-grandfather. So and Pete Coors, who's my dad, is our, I guess he's the vice chairman of the board for Molson Coors, and the chairman of the board, I think, for Miller Coors right now. Those roles alternate. Yes, sir.
What's the impact of the legalization of marijuana on your business operation in the state of Colorado?
Surprisingly, it was less than I thought it would be. We have seen a little bit of pressure on the beer side. So in Colorado, we had medical marijuana for quite a while before we had recreational marijuana. And talking to a lot of my friends, they said if you wanted a green card, which is what you get to get medical marijuana, it was relatively easy to get. So I don't think there's a lot more people smoking marijuana. It's just that where they get it has changed. So I thought it would be a big challenge. And we did see a small dip at first, but it's been relatively moderate. There's a lot of other challenges with legalized marijuana, but beer sales is not one of them. Yes, sir.
So how do you expect, SAB Miller obviously was a big contributor in a large organization.
Yep.
Now with them kind of going out of the picture, how do you think that's going to impact your organization?
From a Shenandoah Brewery perspective, I think it's going to be relatively small, because Miller Coors was run relatively independently to start with. I don't foresee that changing going forward. Molson Coors historically has kind of kept, from a corporate perspective, has not got real deep into a lot of the organizations. One area that I think we are going to struggle is we use a lot of the SAB Miller breweries around the world. I think they have 80 some odd breweries around the world. We use them as benchmarks and shared learning between them. So some of those learnings that we're now getting from Europe and South Africa, we're going to lose some of that. And Molson Coors has some of those strengths, but not as many as SAB Miller does. Yes, sir.
Can you explain why beer has a best use by date?
Surely. So when we package beer is a food product. It's no different than bread or milk or anything else. And over the course of that we put 17 weeks shelf life on most of our brands. Some are 26 weeks, and it just depends on the nature of that brand. At the end of that 17 weeks, that beer is not going to be harmful to your health, but it just won't taste the way it's supposed to taste. So yeah, we put a date on all of our packages, and as you get to the end of that, you're going to start noticing some flavors that are not what we like in our beer. So particularly for Coors Light, you may get kind of a papery note or a cardboard taste to it. And I've had some beer that got real hot and sat out on my porch for a while. And it almost tastes like you're drinking it out of a paper cup. We don't want to have anybody have that experience, so we put that expiration date on it to make sure that you're getting the best quality beer you can. Yes.
I've been told that you used to have a can that you push the button and it had a little button
Yeah,
on it.
the press tab.
Yeah, whatever happened to that can? That was pretty cool.
If we had it today, yeah, if we had it today, it would be a legal nightmare, because the big issue there was, there was one button that you pushed to release the pressure, and a second button that you pushed to open up the drinking hole. The problem is that a lot of people were cutting their thumbs. So you couldn't, today that we have lawsuits going every which way. Before the press tab, there was the pull tab, which some of you guys may remember, where it had a little ring on it and you pulled it off. Well, what would end up happening is you'd have this little ring on your finger with a big sharp metal piece on it, and those were getting thrown everywhere, and people were cutting their feet. And so my great uncle Bill, that was one of the things he really wanted to address, was the amount of litter he saw related to our cans. And so by having the lift tab like we do today, you don't have a piece that's easily lost. And talking about a little bit about Uncle Bill, he was instrumental in development of aluminum can, and recycling was one thing that still is. He's 99 now; he'll be 100 this August. Recycling is something that he's been very passionate for a long time. Shenandoah here, we're a zero landfill facility. We send almost all of our waste to recycling. We do some waste to energy, but yeah, recycling is something that was important, and that's actually where that press tab came from. Yes, sir.
I've had the privilege of drinking beer in Europe, and there you order a beer and it's typically warm. And Americans like their beer cold. What's the history there, and which is better, and why, and all that?
Well, I'm an American, so I'm going to say it's cold. But so you look at and I talked a little bit about the British versus the German heritage. So the British heritage is you sell your beer at what's known as cellar temperature. So basically you've got a cellar underneath your pub, and you keep the beer in there, and whatever temperature that is. And actually, as you look at of studies, cellar temperatures actually got colder over the years in the UK, where in Germany, when you lager a beer or age a beer, you tended to do that in very cold environments, so on ice and things like that. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is that Americans tend to enjoy cold beverages more than they do kind of lukewarm beverages. When you go to Europe and you order a soda, it may come warm. You have to ask for ice. In the United States, if you got a soda without ice in it, I think people would be very surprised. I think some of it is just also culturally. But I prefer my beer, for drinking purposes, pretty darn cold. That's why we put the Blue Mountains on there, so I know when my beer's cold. We do have a panel of folks out in Shenandoah, and I'm lucky enough to be on that panel that taste beer. When you're tasting beer, and trying to pick out those nuances, you do want it a little bit warmer, because it does enable you to pick up some notes that you wouldn't normally be able to taste. So.
John, how do you apply for that?
It's actually a tough test. Yes, sir.
The per capita consumption, like Germany to us, do you know what those numbers are per barrel or per person, whatever?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, no.
Consumption per Mennonite.
That one I really don't know.
That's a secret number.
Historically, the Czechs have been the biggest beer drinkers, and I know the Germans drink more beer than we do here in America, but I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Mine's a comment. We were glad to see you recognized as a National Philanthropy Day, and I'd serve as the president of United Way Board. So just let me applaud you for both the energy, volunteerism, and community impact you have across the way, and the example you set of paying for volunteer hours, I think, is a double win, because it's encouraging your employees to get out and be involved. And just kudos, thank you.
Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
You talked about the loyalty of the local workforce. Can you talk a little bit about the quality relative to other plants across the country?
Yeah, so we send samples of our beer back to Golden. So because this is kind of the history of things, all the Miller brands go back to Milwaukee, all the Coors brands go back to Golden. And they taste them every, I think once a week, well, sometimes multiple times a week. But and I got to sit on the corporate panel before I moved out here, and that was kind of fun. The beer we make here, it's a 10-point scale. Anything under 9 is considered unacceptable. We average about 9.5, 9.6, 9.7 sometimes. But if you lined up 8 beers in front of me, now I grew up in Golden, so I have a little bias, but I could probably pick out Golden because they do have a little bit of a different ester note to it, so kind of a little bit more banana, a little bit more of a red apple flavor to it than we do here in Shenandoah. But they're very close, and we do have folks that do compare our breweries, and if you do have one that comes in below 9, there is a report that, we got to go back and use structured problem solving and figure out what happened and report that back to corporate, because the last thing we need is somebody who is getting a Shenandoah beer today, maybe an Eden beer tomorrow, and saying, this stuff doesn't taste like it normally does. And that is one area that I think we do have a big advantage over a lot of our craft competitors, is that a Coors Light is going to taste like a Coors Light every time, where on the craft side, you may get a really good batch, you may not get a really bad batch, and that's not everybody. Devil's Backbone makes some great beer, very consistent beer. So it's not everybody, but the consistency of our brands from, you name it, alcohol content, carbohydrates, things, we test our beer, I think 200 times before it gets sent out. So the consistency is very, very much there, and it's a critical piece for us.
And I might not have been clear, the quality of your workers here versus the workers at other parts of the country.
We do. Being one of the lead employers here in Shenandoah gives us a big advantage. You look at, I worked in the brewery in California. There are a lot of other competitive opportunities for them. From an hourly perspective, because it's a union facility where we're not union here, a lot of people stay just because they're in the union and they're working towards their pension. But from a salary perspective, we don't see nearly the turnover here as we do in a lot of our other breweries, because people kind of like it here. So. Last question?
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Oh.
What's your? No comment.
I was curious, what kinds of positions do you have at this location?
So the question was, what type of positions do we have here at this location? So we handle all of the operations side. We don't do any sales and marketing, although we do have sales folks that do reside here in Virginia. None of them at the brewery. So all the way from production supervision, obviously all of our hourly folks working in many different areas, electricians, mechanics, utilities, all that kind of stuff. We do have a finance department here, HR, so it's a pretty wide piece. But we don't, the corporate functions, around sales and marketing are not here in Shenandoah, but just about everything else is. All right.
Great. Thank you, Peter, for the discussion today. Thanks to everyone here for all the great questions, and really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day to come speak with us. So thank you. Reminder, there's a board meeting right now in the Monroe room.